now and a legislative session on jet fuel. Bills are flying through committees, the biggest and most controversial passing along the Republican supermajority party lines. And this week, the governor already has signed some into law. That will likely happen with a bill they call public safety, which you'll know better as permit-free gun carry. It is on the way to the Senate, having passed the full House this week. That too passed along party lines, but for one Republican who voted against it. And that state rep is Vicki Lopez, in her first term representing District 113 from Miami to Coral Gables and Key Biscayne. Vicki, great to have you aboard again.
Thank you so much, Glenna. Great to be with you.
So was this a principled vote, a gutsy vote, or both?
Well, I'm not sure that it's gutsy. I think, it's always easy to do what you think is right for your district. And for District 113, I truly believed, after speaking to so many people in my district, that their perception of the current law as it is now makes them safer. And when you represent a district that is very dense, with many people living in a very close urban area, I think that public safety is always on the minds of everyone. And I truly believe, I did a lot of research, Glenna. I went back to the original right to carry law in 1987 that was actually supported by the NRA and by the United Sportsmen of Florida. And, it was their intent at that time was to allow people to carry. And, I'm one of those people that has a concealed weapon license and feel very strongly about self-defense. It's one of the reasons why I own a firearm. But I think that the intent in 1987 really holds true today. People actually thought that you could strike the balance between the right to carry as well as the right to ensure that people were safe, right? And so in that law, they actually listed out disqualifying offenses of people that they thought should have a gun, not the least of which is people with domestic violence injunctions, people that have been convicted of felonies, people that have multiple DUIs. There are certain disqualifying characteristics of what they think is a good candidate for the right to carry. You don't need a license to have a gun in your home or in your car. So that wasn't where they thought that the danger might be. They thought it might be, upon the right to carry, right, to have it on your person. And so, in talking to people in my district, they didn't think that there was a need to change anything. And quite frankly, remember that 10% of the applications, the highest number of applications for a license come from Miami-Dade County. So I had to find that balance and felt strongly that nothing had changed between 1987 when the current law was put into place and today. And what I think has changed is there's far greater people living in District 113, particularly people that have moved from other states during the pandemic and post-pandemic. So, for me, it's what my district wants and needs. And that's what I think is real representation.
That actually is the definition of representation. And you, worth it to say, you flipped that district red in the last election. You ran as a center-right moderate Republican. You are a Second Amendment supporter. I want to just sort of frame this really interesting debate that we've talked about on this program over this bill. For supporters of this bill, it's about gun rights. And for opponents of the bill, largely it's about gun safety. And what's so interesting is that gun rights and gun safety are pretty much everyone can agree on both. And so there are these series of amendments, to your point, to try to make the safety component a little bit more black and white. And a lot of the Democrats did broach amendments like training requirements and keeping a gun from someone who was convicted of a misdemeanor, violent misdemeanor. Would one of those, none passed, but would one of those or more of those have sort of changed your view and maybe changed your vote?
Possibly. I'm really concerned about the training. I myself, underwent a 3-day course where, I learned not only what the law was, but I also learned how to protect myself. It's a huge responsibility to carry a firearm. And I'm painfully aware that I can take someone's life. And I want to make sure that I'm a responsible gun owner, and I think I became much more responsible knowing how to use my firearm and in the circumstances in which how I would use that firearm, right? So the fact that, you know, there is money in the bill to help with training is a plus, but it's not mandated. And quite frankly, I don't think people are going to just naturally want to go do their training unless it is mandated. And I know it's a complicated issue, Glenna. I understand both sides of the issue, especially being a supporter of the Second Amendment. But listen, crime is up in my district, unfortunately, both in Brickell and in downtown. And I think that for all of us, the perception of living in an urban area is we can do both. This bill does not in any way, my opposition to the bill did not in any way say that people can't own guns. I mean, I certainly believe in the right to own a gun. I just believe that you should be well trained to use it. And if you have if you're a convicted felon and you have domestic violence injunctions, I just don't see the reason why I wish upon you or anyone else in our district that you would actually carry.
We want to take a quick break, but there's a couple of questions about the politics of this to a political veteran that you are that I want to broach. So stay tuned. We'll be back in 2 with Vicki Lopez. Back with State Representative Vicki Lopez, Republican of District 113, the lone Republican in the House to vote no on the permitless carry bill that is now headed to the Senate. Vicki, the bill is, the headline of it for everyone is permitless carry, and that's what we've heard the debate about, and that's what we've been talking about for months now. But there is millions of dollars in programming and hardening of schools earmarked for school security. In fact, the bill was renamed public safety because of that. And I wonder if that kind of gave you pause voting against a bill that had that kind of component in it.
It did, Glenna. And I wished it had not been combined. I wish there had been a public safety bill separate and apart, because certainly I would have voted for that. I've been a real proponent of making our schools safer. I'm concerned, again, in the urban areas, our schools, people are walking to and from school. There's access to our school children. And so it was a difficult choice there because of the combination. I had to vote against something that I would have absolutely been a proponent and a co-sponsor of. So that was difficult. Yes.
But you knew it was going to pass, though. Was that sort of, I mean, when you voted no, there's no doubt in your mind that this is going to pass and the governor's going to sign it, right?
I knew that. Yeah, absolutely. I knew it was going to pass. But again, I have a very interesting and diverse district, right? I have 39% of the voters are no party affiliated. And so my sense of the way I have to represent my district is I have to govern, for all the people, and I have to put people over politics. And truly, I'm a person who really loves my district and am willing to listen to everyone and then have to formulate what's best for that district based on their input.
Sure. So I want to ask you sort of, take our viewers like inside and behind the scenes. People know that there's horse trading that goes on, there's conversation, there's whipping of the vote. You're a freshman in Tallahassee, but you are a total veteran of politics in the state political world, a former commissioner in Lee County, a lobbyist of sorts, an advocate, and I wonder if you're concerned that there might be consequences to this vote, i.e. a committee assignment you might have wanted and won't get, or a bill of yours that might be backburnered to teach you a lesson. I feel like I'm going where we know there is to go, and I'm hoping you just kind of give our viewers a behind the scenes of what your concerns are, if any. Or not. I
actually don't have any concerns about that. I am very proud to say that our leadership understands that I think they understand who I am, right? And I think they understand my district. And I was very comfortable having conversations with leadership about this, and never once did anyone make me feel as if not voting along party lines was going to somehow, endanger or threaten anything that I want to do. I mean, I think that they recognize that I have a lot of experience in Tallahassee, that even though I'm a freshman, I'm not a freshman. But I do believe that leadership, and certainly Speaker Renner, has been very supportive of allowing me to give voice to my district, a district that we have flipped and a district that I know better than anyone. And I'm so grateful for that, because it never once was a difficult vote to take in any way. I mean, I wasn't fearful. I wasn't, oh my God, what could possibly happen to me? On the contrary, I felt very good about them listening to me and actually respecting that I would take that kind of vote and be the only no vote on the board.
So on the flip side, maybe the House Speaker knew that one no vote wasn't going to change the outcome, and this was an opportunity for him to showcase you to your district as, in a very, split district, as someone who really does take care of her constituents. How's that for strategy?
Well, that would be brilliant. And I do have a lot of respect for Speaker Renner, and I know him to be a really good listener. And yes, I mean, I'm sure he knew that we would pass this, but he has a lot of respect for the individual members of his chamber. And I, for one, am always the recipient of that, not only from him, but from his leadership team. So I tell you, if this is the way it's going to go, I'm going to be very honored to serve under his leadership and in the House of Representatives, because I am going to continue to be a very independent thinker and a person who is going to represent her district in the best way in which she thinks that that can be done. And so grateful for the opportunity to do so.
And we here are always ready to amplify anybody who is leading our state, who is fair and who is a principled thinker and takes care of constituents. So it's always a pleasure to have you here, Vicki. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Glenn. It was great being with you.